Welcome, welcome. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. I guess I don't know where we're all coming from. It's so nice to have you all this morning. Welcome to the Buzz on Bees. I hope we're all so excited to learn about bees today. Nice to see everyone. I see we've got lots of people coming in. And if you are able to, it would be great if you could take a moment to add your location on your Zoom name so we can see where you're all joining from. Maybe Alberta or Ontario, or if you're from another country. I know we have a few signed up from other countries. I would like to see that country as well. If you're not really sure how to rename yourself, that's okay. You can just write a little welcome message in the chat letting us know where you're from, and I or my colleague Sarah will go ahead and update your name for you. So nice to see everyone. I love seeing so many cameras on. It's the best. We hope you guys are excited to learn about bees. We were just chatting about spring flowers and pollinators before we let you guys in here. So I hope it's as sunny and beautiful where everybody else is. We can all get into the mood for pollinator day. I know it's super sunny here in Edmonton. So, okay, awesome. I'm getting some locations. Kitchener, Okanagan, Ottawa. Wonderful. So nice to see you all. Okay, while we wait for a few of our other schools to join, I do have a little bit of practice trivia for you. So a really good way that you guys can be involved in the event today is by typing your questions and your responses in the chat. So if you have something you want your teacher to share with us, you let them know and they can type it in the chat. So we'll practice that right now by doing a little bit of fun trivia. So my first question is, how many species of bees do you think there are on Earth? A, 2,000, B, 7,500, C, 13,000, or D, is there more than 25,000? You can go ahead and type your A, B, C, D, or if you have your camera on, you can use your fingers to show me which option you want to choose. A, B, C, or D. I'm seeing a few guesses from some of our classes here. Ooh, a bit of a tricky question. Some C's and D's, yeah. I think we all know there's a lot of bees, but how many are there? These numbers are so big, it's hard for me even to think about how many that actually is. Hey, good guesses, good guesses. All right, correct answer for this one is actually D. There's over 25,000 species of bees on Earth. And we'll talk in a little bit more about how many of them you might find in Canada, but that's how many we have across the entire Earth. Yeah, let's try number 2. Those are good guesses, everyone. Number 2, other than bees, which of these are also pollinators? Is it the hummingbird, the butterfly, the beetle, or all of the above? Which of these also work as pollinators? Now, if you don't really know what I mean by pollinator, we will talk about that again a little bit later. Hey, I see some C's and D's, lots of D's. I see a lot of fingers up. Oh, maybe we all think, oh, I see a bee in here, the butterfly. Maybe some of us have seen butterflies land on flowers before. I think I've seen that. Hey, good guesses. All right, so for this one, the correct answer, again, is actually D. All of these can be pollinators. Yeah, good job, everyone. You guys are doing great. Okay, I have one more trivia question for you before we officially start. My last question, which of these is not a job that a bee might have in a hive? So there's lots of different jobs in a hive. Which of these is not a job for a bee? Is it A, fighter, B, drone, C, queen, or D, nurse? And I just can't help when I think nurse of like a bee with a little nurse's cap on. I don't think they wear the nurse's outfit. So I see some A's, some D's. I see a couple B's on our fingers here. What do we think? Which is not a job? D. Oh, a lot of us don't think we have nurses. I might have tricked you all with this one. I see an A from Ms. Pretluck's class. Okay. Last call for answers. What do we think? Hey, correct answer for this one is A. Even though some bees do have to do some fighting, that's not an actual job for a bee. So some of our drones might have to do a little bit of fighting if they come across someone that they need to fight while they're out collecting pollen, but fighter is not a job. Queen, we all know there's a queen bee. That's awesome. And nurses are the ones that help raise the young. So correct answer for this one was A. Thank you very much for participating in my trivia. That was really good practice. Keep in mind during our event, if you guys have questions for our expert, type them in the chat. We will get to them as soon as we can, and we love answering questions. So that's a really good way that you can stay involved with what we're chatting about today. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and officially welcome everyone to Life on Land, the Buzz on Bees with the Canadian Wildlife Federation. I hope everyone is excited as I am today to learn about bees. They're one of my favorite animals, so let's get right to it. I'd love to begin by acknowledging that I am joining from a Misquechiwa So this is colonially known as Edmonton, Alberta, and it's on Treaty 6 territory. It's the traditional lands of many diverse groups, including the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux. And since we're joining on a virtual platform, I also want to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional lands that we're all joining from across Turtle Island and around the world. So acknowledging traditional lands is a really important first step in the reconciliation process. It can help us improve that relationship with our environment and hopefully with the diverse peoples that have served as protectors of those lands for time immemorial. And having a good respect for land and all of the living creatures that help give you food, shelter, and life is an important step in that reconciliation process. And we're very lucky today to be able to look a little bit deeper into that connection with the land. And we're going to explore how you can help give back to the earth in a meaningful way. So during the event today, try to keep this in the forefront of your mind and think about that connection that you have to the land and all the many living things that you share it with, including things like pollinators. Just a quick look at our agenda so you're aware of what's going to be happening today. We will try to save a little bit of time at the end of the event for some question and answers. So if you're watching the event today and you're thinking of some great questions, that's awesome. We want to get to those good questions, so try to come up with a couple great ones so that we can get some conversation going. I did want to take a moment too to welcome all of these amazing schools that have signed up for the event today. So hopefully everyone joining us can see your names up there. I know tons of us are joining from YouTube and we'll be watching this a little bit later. So welcome to those of us on YouTube. And that's a good little reminder as well. If you are joining from YouTube, feel free to add comments as well. So my colleague, Sarah, will pass those comments over to us so you can participate just as well. So welcome to all these schools across Canada. I see lots of other countries in here as well, Argentina and Egypt, Korea. So it's so great to have you all here. Super excited that you guys are all interested in this just as much as we are. Oh, and one last reminder, we do have this activity sheet. So if your teacher was able to print off this activity sheet for you, you are welcome to pass it out and work on it as we talk through some of these things. So a couple of these things we'll be talking about today during the event. And if we get some time at the end, we love to get you to share your pictures on camera. So if you have some time during the live event today, you guys are welcome to work on these, and we love to see your work. Now, if you don't have time to work on it during the event, or we don't get to the camera, it would be great if your teachers could take some pictures of these and send them to us, because we love seeing them. And I know that our partners at the CWF love seeing them as well. So speaking of the CWF, I would love to welcome Sarah Culver. She's a naturalist and gardener since she was a little girl, when she would delight in all of the plants and animals in her backyard. Her love for nature led to several environmental jobs and naturalist volunteer roles before coming to join the CWF's Backyard Habitat Program in 2002. Now called the Gardening for Wildlife Program, Sarah continues to write and speak about wildlife, plants, and how we can support them in our own outdoor spaces. Sarah co-manages the wildlife-friendly demonstration garden around CWF headquarters in Canada, Ontario, where you might find her taking photos of the remarkable plants and its visitors, or leading a walk with an interested group. So welcome, Sarah. I will now go ahead and pass it over to you, and you can go ahead and get started.
Thank you. That's so great. I am just going to share my screen now. Can you all see the bee on the screen now with the yellow gold?
Looks perfect.
Okay, super. Okay, well, I am so glad you're all here because I get to share with you some stuff that I love about bees, our tiny little neighbors on this planet. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are. The Canadian Wildlife Federation that I work for is a national organization, so we help Canadians all across the country. And we've been around for over 60 years now. And we do many different things to help wildlife. And we do it through educating adults and children alike through events like this. We conduct research in the field. and we help work with policymakers so the decisions that people make are wise ones. And you can see at the top here some pictures of some of the things we do working with school children. There's our turtle team doing some research, our CEO at a conference working on the ocean to help the whales, and a pollinator work in the field as well. So today we'll talk about why bees are important, a bit about pollinators, how bees live, parts of the bee. We're going to meet a bunch of bees and their lookalikes, and ways we can help them, including being a citizen scientist with your photos. So let's get started. Why bees are important? Well, they're our neighbors. They're part of the planet. They deserve to be here and to live well as us. But especially, they also have a very important role to play. They're pollinators. So do you guys know what pollination is before we talk a bit more about pollinators? Maybe you guys can think about what pollination might be. So I'm not sure if anyone wants to share that with it in the chat, or if you just want me to keep on moving along. Rebecca, do you want me to keep moving along, or do you want to wait for chat?
We do also have the option, if any of our classes wanted to share on the microphone, there is an option at the bottom of your screen for a reaction, and you can raise your hand. And that just lets me know that you guys do have something that you want to share, and we can share it that way. Or if you have your thoughts and your students have your thoughts, you can type them in the chat. So did we have any schools that wanted to share their thoughts on pollination on the microphone? I don't even know if we have any schools with working microphones. Okay, I don't see any on miking, but I do see we do have an answer: getting pollen from flowers and bringing it to other flowers.
Okay, great. Yeah, so pollen is actually transferring pollen from one flower to another. And when that happens, when the pollen from the male part of the flower gets on different hairs on the bee inadvertently, like the bees are going to the flowers to get nectar and pollen, and they gather it in a certain way, but extra pollen gets on their bodies. And when they go to the next flower, it accidentally sort of gets brushed off on that flower. And if it goes onto a female part, it fertilizes that flower, that it can then make a fruit or a nut or a seed. And I think maybe then you can realize why this is pretty important. It's such an important process because so much of the food we eat is thanks to pollinators. If you think of chocolate, strawberries and grapes and tomatoes and cucumbers, it's thanks to pollinators that have helped make this happen. And this is really important also because farmers and stores and all kinds of businesses all across the country rely on this to have a business and to thrive and help what's called our economy. And pollinators also help the plants and animals in our natural spaces. So if you go to different areas, whether it's woods or prairies, maybe a park in your area, you see there's a diversity of different plants there. And that's because pollinators are helping them to continue to reproduce and make the seeds and the fruit that then get perhaps eaten by other animals and get taken elsewhere in that area to plant a new plant and expand itself. And pollinators also can help with pest control. There's a picture here at the bottom of one of our wasps, and they're pollinators. And unlike bees that eat pollen and nectar, wasps eat insects. So they will take an insect and bring it back to their nest. And when animals do that, they help those species stay in check. So if they didn't do that, there'd be too many of them, and that could be a problem for our farms, for instance, or even for our homes. So they help keep those potential species in balance, so there's never a problem, and they're doing really good services for us like that. So who are Canada's pollinators? We have 7 kinds of pollinators. And if you look from the left, that's a bee at the top, and below it is a fly. It's actually called a flower fly. And you can see how tiny it is. Some of them are so tiny, and some of them are quite large. Next to them is a wasp at the top and a beetle below that. And the next to that, the big picture, is one of our kinds of moths. Some moths live at night. Some of them never eat, believe it or not. They just mate, lay eggs, and then they die. But this one is out during the day. It's called a hummingbird clearwing moth. They hover in front of flowers like hummingbirds do, and they're pollinators. And the next to that is a butterfly and a hummingbird. Now, of these, though, we're going to talk about bees. They are one of Canada's most important pollinators, but there's another kind that's also very important pollinator, just to keep in mind as you're moving about your day and looking in the garden. Flies. There are so many flies that are extremely important in Canada to pollinate. So those are our 2 most important kinds. But now getting back to bees. So how do bees live? they live in groups. And when they do that, they're called social bees, like honeybees do that. And many bumblebees do that. Or they live on their own, which means they're solitary. Or there's different combinations in between. But a lot of our bees, most of our bees, are solitary. They grow up, they make a nest, they mate, they lay their eggs, they leave food for the eggs, they seal them off, and then they die. Or else perhaps they have different combinations of maybe living a little bit longer, but they never actually have a beehive to protect like a honeybee does. And because they're solitary, they don't have a need to protect the hive or a hive because they don't have one. It's already done and it's protected, so they don't even need to sting. So a lot of them don't even have stingers. And a lot of those that still do have stingers, they're not even strong enough to penetrate and pierce the skin. And the few that do, well, it's not usually a big issue. It's more like the social bees that really have a vested interest to protect their hive all season long. So keep that in mind as I'm showing you bees. They're not all going to be wanting to sting you. A lot of them are very safe and docile and gentle. So the next thing about bees is a lot of them nest in the ground. And some of them nest in cavities, which means like a hole in a stem of a plant that might be a little bit hollow, or it's soft in the middle so they can chew inside and they can make a little nest in a long stem. Some of them nest in cavities in stones and whatnot, or in tree stumps and old dead or dying trees you might see, in logs on the ground. So they make a nest in all kinds of places. And another aspect of how they live is how they feed. So they'll go to flowers for nectar and pollen, and some of them will gather the pollen on what's called scopa. They're hairs on their legs or on the underside of their body, on their abdomen, that gathers and stores the pollen till they get it back to where they need to go. Another way is to gather it on what's called a corbicula. So if you look at the bottom right picture, there's a bumblebee with two really big orange balls of pollen. That's called either a pollen sac, pollen basket, or the technical term is corbicula. And you can kind of see some of the hairs. It's a hollow indentation on their leg with some hairs, and that allows them to store the pollen on that. And then there's one kind of bee that will actually store it in its crop as well. I'll show you a bit later. So hopefully you can see that detail on your screen wherever you are. So there's parts of the bee. I mentioned the abdomen. A lot of the bee parts are similar to us. We both have heads that we call heads. We both have abdomens that we call abdomens, or tummies areas. But the chest area that we would call for ourselves, we refer to that as a thorax in an insect. So you can kind of see parts of the bee here. And I'm showing it again here without the circles in case that's easier for you to see. So when I'm talking about gathering pollen, a lot of them have it on their legs, and some of them have it on the underside of their abdomen. And that's what they're purposefully carrying back to their nest. They get pollen all over their bodies, and that's what helps with pollination. So my question for you now is, how many bee species are native to Canada, do you think? A, less than, I can't see, move that over so I can read it out.
Sorry, did it pop over your screen?
Less than 100, B, 170, C, 550, or D, over 900? You guys.
So if you did not get the poll to pop up on your screen, you might just have to access it on the bottom of your Zoom screen. But you can get an answer from your class and go ahead and answer in the poll so we can see what everyone's thinking. And so far, I'm seeing mostly C's and D's coming in. We can give it maybe a few more seconds to try to get some more answers here. Oh, it's actually starting to spread. We've got A, B, C, and D as answers on here.
And it's tricky because, I mean, again, how do we know how many species there are? How many individual kinds of bees are there? And that number does keep changing as scientists keep discovering new things.
So here's what our students were thinking. Mostly C and D, but we do have a mixture of all of them.
Okay, well, the answer is, go to the next screen.
Oh, sorry.
Hang on, I'm gonna click here. Do I minimize it on my screen then, shall I? Or
you can exit out of it. Yeah, it automatically pops up on your screen, so it thinks of you as a participant. But yeah, you don't have to worry about it.
So the answer is D, over 900 species. And recently we thought it was around 800 or under 800, but now scientists are saying, well, we think there's actually more than 900 species or specific kinds of bees that live in Canada and are native to Canada. So we're going to meet some of them now. So bumblebees, they're one group of bees. Some people just think a bumblebee and there's just a bumblebee. There's actually a whole bunch of bumblebees. There's many bumblebee species, and we call them bumblebees, and same with other groups, or genera is the technical term, because they share some characteristics. They have some things in common. So bumblebees, if you look at these, each one is kind of large, kind of fuzzy, but they've got different markings. The one on the left has like an orange band across its abdomen. The next one has mainly yellow in its abdomen. The third one is pretty much black, mainly black on its abdomen, and the other one has a bit of black and yellow. So that can tell you a little bit about the different species. And as you go on watching bumblebees, see if you can notice what bumblebee you're seeing. Another kind is a mason bee. When you look at that, you might think it looks kind of like a fly. So maybe the next time you see an insect flying by and you think it's a fly, maybe look a little closer if it's safe to, and if you've got the time to, and you might discover maybe it's a bee, not a fly, although both are good. We know both are useful. So this is a mason bee, and they carry the pollen also on the underside of their abdomen. And they're also known as orchard bees because they're out in the spring and they love to pollinate and visit trees like apple trees and plum trees. And so if you like things like apples and cherries and plums, then you can probably thank bees, in particular this one, mason bee. And this is another bee. I took this at home. It was on my screen and I needed to help it get out of the house. So I took a little tiny container to catch it and very gently get it in the container and took it outside. And in my container is tiny. You can imagine just how tiny this little guy was. But I zoomed in so you could see some of the coloring. The face has sort of some yellow on it, and the legs have some yellow on it. And it doesn't have much hair. It's pretty much a hairless bee. And this is the bee I was telling you about, that when it gets the nectar and the pollen, it actually stores it in what's called a crop, kind of like a bird. It's not going into the stomach to be digested. It's like a little sack, a bag inside that it holds it. And then when it gets to the nest, it regurgitates it out mixed with saliva and nectar for the baby, for the eggs. Leafcutter bees, they're kind of neat. They also store pollen on the underside of their abdomen. And you can tell a leafcutter bee, I'm told by the experts, that when it lands on the flower, if the tip of its abdomen is sticking up, then you can tell that's a leafcutter bee. Because a lot of these bees do have similar markings. So never want to assume we know exactly what it is without checking it out pretty carefully. But they're really cool. They get their name because when they make their nest, they actually go to leaves and they cut out little circles and they gather it and they take it to their nest. And I wish I had pictures for you, but I've not got a picture of a bee-lined nest. But they line the nest, which is like a long, narrow, little tiny tunnel. And they line the nest with these leaves. And they often chew up the leaves and use the leaves to seal the nest as well. And scientists have found that the leaves they choose, very smart, nature is so smart, they use leaves that have what's called microbial, antimicrobial, antibacterial kind of properties, so that when the young are in the nest, they're protected from any kind of perhaps bacteria or microbes that could harm them otherwise. Here's what's called an adrena bee. It's on one of our flowers here called a bellwort. And I just think it's such a beautiful bee. And you can see some of the pollen on its leg. I couldn't decide which picture to show you, so I put them both up so you get to see it in action. And these little guys, mining bees, they're also spring bees. And if you look at the flower on the left, I wonder how many of you can figure out what flower that is. It's from a tree. It's from a tree that blooms early in the season. And I'm not quite sure how far across it goes across the country. I should have double checked that before I asked, but it's actually a red maple. Those are red maple flowers. And thanks to these bees, they pollinate them. They make the seeds, which help make more maple trees. And you can see how tiny the flowers are and how tiny the bee is as well. And there's a wild geranium next to the other one. Another group of bees are called halicted bees. They're called sweat bees and metallic sweat bees. And you can see the one on the left and in the middle, they've got a really brilliant green metallic sheen to them. Even the one on the right, on the thorax, you can see some green. They're fantastic. The one in the middle was watching me as I was taking the pictures. It was aware of me and it was watching me very carefully and warily, like, can I trust her or not? And I always like to talk to them, and I'm very gentle and I'm very slow and I'm very soft when I'm around them, so they know they're safe. And they generally just keep on pollinating all around me. They never worry, they never bother me, and they never, act aggressively, because we're just peacefully doing our own thing. And that little guy I thought was so cool to see close up, the dots on the eyes. And the one on the right is yarrow flower, which is another pretty native flower, and on the left is a hawthorn from a hawthorn bush. Now these bees, squash bees, they don't go right across the country. They're more of an easterly bee, but and it's just one species in this case. It's not a group of them. It's just one kind of bee, and they pollinate things like pumpkins. So thanks to them, we've got pumpkins and squash and gourd and cucumber if you like them, and zucchini. And what I like to tell people is, if you have this growing in your garden, please just note that often, again, they're ground nesters, like some of them, a lot of them are. They nest below the ground. And so when you are digging up your plants at the end of the year, don't dig too deeply. Don't dig too aggressively, because then you will leave, if you don't do that, then you can leave their nests be, and then they can survive, and then they can continue working and populating and growing in your garden. If we dig too deeply and too much, we disturb a lot of the nests of these ground nesting bees. And these are super efficient pollinators, these guys. Another one, tiny, tiny, tiny little bees, only a few millimeters long, called small carpenter bees. And you can imagine, if you see on the left, that's a willow flower, and they're pretty small. So there's a little guy pollinating that. The one in the middle, I'm not sure if you can see with your screen, but on its face is like a white upside down T. And that's one of the ways you can recognize that's a male small carpenter bee. Now, I said a lot of our bees are ground nesters. So the fact they're in the ground, you think ground can get damp from the rain and whatnot. They all have an ability to line their nests with something that is water resistant or waterproof. This one in particular, this cellophane or polyester bee, theirs is extra looking like what cellophane is, which is why they get their name. It's extra plasticky looking. So they're pretty neat with what they can accomplish. Nature is just so brilliant. Now, here's a bee you probably all know. It's the honeybee. They're not native to Canada. So when the Canadian Wildlife Federation talks about bees and we talk about helping bees, we're talking about our native bees that are from here and live in the wild. Honeybees, they're kind of like chickens and cows. We farm them. They were brought here and they're useful and we appreciate them, but they're not our native bees. So when I'm talking about supporting bees, generally speaking, what we're talking about our native ones. Okay, now here's a question if you want to do another poll. Which of these is a bee? We have one on the left and one on the right. They're on the exact same bush called a button bush, which I guess you can imagine why it's called a button bush. And two different insects on these flowers. And I wonder which one's the bee and which one's the fly.
This is tricky. Even when you sent it to me, I was like, I don't even know which one is the bee.
And I'll tell you after how to tell, but I just thought I would just, for fun, put it in here and see what you guys think.
No, I can see our class is deliberating a bit. I think it's a little tricky.
It's tricky for sure. Once you know what to look for and you get used to looking for it, it gets easier and easier and it becomes more intuitive. But when you first stop to think about it, it's like, which one is it?
Yeah. Okay, and I think we just have one more answer. There we go. Okay, see how we did. Oh, they got 50-50.
Okay. Well, let's see if I can click the screen so you can see which one's which. Ta-da! Bee is on the right side. And I'm going to tell you now, when you look at the bee on the right side, you can see that orange ball around it near its body. That's the pollen sac. That's the bee collecting the pollen on its leg. And flies don't do that. And this is a bumblebee, so it has the ability on its leg with the corbicula, those hairs I showed you, to hold that pollen ball in place. So as it gathers more pollen and it mixes it with saliva and nectar, it can add it to the pollen basket. So let's look at why. Flies generally have larger, rounder eyes. So there's two pictures on the left, and those are flies. And you can kind of see how those eyes take up most of the space on their head. They also have shorter antennae. If you compare it with the two on the right, which are bees, you can see that those two have longer antennae. And their eyes, even though their eyes are kind of long, they're more elongated. And to me, they have more of a shiny, smooth look as it compared to the flies. And flies don't have the ability to catch and hold the pollen on their legs or abdomen the way most bee species do. They still get the pollen inadvertently on the hair of their body, which is why they're pollinators, but it's not something they're gathering and collecting on purpose. In fact, you can see some of the pollen on the fly on the far left there too. Okay, now you know that. Can you guess again which one is a bee and which one is a fly? And the fly is also a flower fly again, when I'm referring to.
I like this one because I feel like they each have a few characteristics that we've looked at. Yeah, this is a fun one. You guys are really going to have to use what we've been learning.
And I was fooled before too, and lots of people I know have been fooled before, but once you know what to look for, then it's like, I can tell. It just takes a bit of practice.
So we're thinking, I can share it with you all so you can see what you're thinking. A lot of us are thinking it was the one on the right that's the bee this time.
Yeah, so look at the length of the antenna, look at the eyes. Don't be fooled by the colors. Don't be fooled by the shape or size of the body.
Yeah, I think we got them all in. Yep, it looks like most people said right.
Okay. What I'm going to do is close this down and go to the next slide. And you said on the right, you're correct. That's a flower fly. And just a cool little tidbit for you to know, flower flies also have another name called a hover fly. That's because they'll often hover. And if ever you have a little tiny fly hovering in front of your face, all curious to know what you're about, chances are it's a hover or flower fly. And then, of course, the insect on the left is a bee, one of our teeny tiny little bees. So we've learned a bit about them, but how can we help these incredible allies, pollinators, neighbors that we have? So for food, we can help by having different shapes and sizes of flowers. You saw all those bees. They're different sizes. Some of them are more active in the spring and the fall or all summer long. You need to have different shapes to help them, different sizes, and then also blooming from early spring to late fall. So you've got a real mix of flowers and a real mix of when they're blooming, because some of our bees come out first thing in the spring. And I'm talking here where I am in the Ottawa area. That's like, mid to end April. And what's blooming then, you'll see on the bottom left, that's a willow, one of our many, many species of native willow. Willows are fantastic. They're incredibly important food or shrubs, trees for our pollinators. So if ever you're thinking of what to plant and you're willing to plant a willow, some of them are shrubs. They don't have to get too huge. It's great if you can have a willow to help all the queen bees that are emerging first thing in the spring looking for food, which they need to fuel themselves in order to then make their colony. And then you see next to that is a plant called bloodroot. That's another beautiful spring plant. At the top is a mixture showing small tubular flowers, larger ones, open flowers, again, all different shapes and sizes. And a quick thing about flowers, I think I have to wrap it up soon, but a quick thing about flowers is some of them, like you think of the one on the top right there that's red and yellow, or think of a sunflower. You think that's the flower. It's actually called a flower head, and the showy petal-like structures are around the edge. But inside are so many tiny little, they're the flowers that have the pollen and nectar that the bees and other pollinators are going to. And when you think of it, if ever you've seen a sunflower that's been fertilized and has made seed, you see all these seeds, lots and lots of little seeds. That's because every seed you see was from a flower. So that just shows you how many flowers has provided food for all these wonderful pollinators. So again, all different sizes, all different shapes. But a little thing at the bottom right is actually from a herb. That's one of my basil plants at home. And I always let some of my herbs go to flower to help the pollinators. And then when they've done that and the plant has made seeds, I can take some seeds and I can grow my plants again next year. So that's a fun activity you guys can do at school or at home, perhaps. Grow your herbs, harvest the seeds, and plant some more next year. And I wanted to show this up close. I mentioned bloodroot, but I just love this. It's a small flower, but you blow it up and you can see this bee was going all around the edge and it's covered in pollen, and it's just fascinating what they do. So that was food for shelter. Perhaps you can dig as little as possible to disturb as few nests as possible. That's also really important for the soil organisms in the soil, like bacteria, fungi. They're so important. Plants are signaling information to them to get the kinds of nutrients they need, how much they need, when they need it. So everything in the soil, it should be, if it's healthy, is teeming with millions of microorganisms living below ground, kind of like how we're living above ground, busy doing our thing. There's life below ground. So the less you can dig, the more you're leaving them intact. And of course, you can leave some dried stems that are hollow, or tree stumps or fallen logs for the other kinds of bees to make nests in. And of course, if you can avoid pesticides, because that is for killing off insects, herbicides and insecticides. So if you can instead, of grow lots of different plants. That helps to make it harder for them to get attacked. Strengthen plants with beautiful, healthy compost. Match plants to the right conditions. So if it needs sun, put it where it's sun. If it needs moisture, put it where it's got moisture. So it's going to be thriving and stronger and less susceptible to insect attacks. And then you attract helpers like birds and bats and toads and snakes and other beneficial insects. And if you do have to do something, do things gently with a spray of water or some dish soap and water, perhaps. And if any of you like to take pictures, you might want to join something called iNaturalist. It's where you can get help identifying species. You can help scientists who are always monitoring the information being put on iNaturalist, and they might discover a new species in a new area and get all excited about that. Or they can tell about the populations. Is it getting bigger or smaller? Is it a concern or is it good and healthy? And you can learn about nature. All you have to do is take pictures of the wild plants and animals, not your pet, sorry, wild plants and animals, and upload to iNaturalist if that's something that interests you. Maybe you can talk to your teacher or your parent about that. And then there's a lot of different resources where you can get more information. Some of these pictures were from, a lot of them were mine, but a lot of them were Heather Holmes. She's a fantastic researcher, author, and she's been very kind enough to let people use her pictures for these sorts of purposes. She's got great books. I love her books. And there are other books as well you can get that might be useful to have to learn about the bees in your area. And of course, the Canadian Wildlife Federation, we've got posters and handouts. And if you go to our website, there's something called Wild Spaces, which is for, I think, classrooms of your age group to plant pollinators, pollinating flowers and help the pollinators that come to them. Gardening for Wildlife has a lot of information about pollinators, and we're revamping our pollinator sections with lots of great information there for you. And I just want to say thank you and wish you well in enjoying and supporting all the bees in your area. So there I am. I think I went a little bit over time, but hopefully that's okay.
You're plenty good. Thank you very much. So I hope we kind of get the same vibe that I got today, that bees are nice and friendly and we should love them. We shouldn't be afraid of them. You should go out and discover them and take a closer look at them. It kind of brings me to our first question that we have in the chat. And just a reminder to all of our schools, now's your chance. If you have any questions, any bee questions at all, now's your chance to pop those in the chat and we'll go ahead and answer them. The first one is asking, my students are curious about wasps and whether they act as pollinators or are they only mean stingers?
Very good question. So wasps are definitely pollinators. They're definitely good pollinators. Not up my front step, sipping tea quietly, and a paper wasp would land right next to me on the railing and take a little bit of wood and then go to make its nest. And we were perfectly peaceful and safe together. So it is possible, but you must, of course, be wise and mindful of what you need to do to be safe. So long answer, but
yeah.
Some more to wasps than we realized. So yeah.
Yeah, as long as we're being respectful and calm around them a lot of the time, it's not an issue at all. That's a great question, Nicole Father-Jean. Thank you very much. The next question is from Jody. What do bees do when they bring pollen back to their hives?
Okay, well, so the bumblebee, which has the hive, they will feed their young in a certain way, kind of similar to the honeybees, similarly. But a lot of the bees that are solitary, they'll have they get their nest underground or in a stem, and it's usually a long tunnel. And again, there's many variations of this, but for this example, they will lay an egg, they will leave a little pollen ball, which is the pollen next with a little bit of their saliva or nectar, and then they seal it off, and they do this a few times. Then they seal off that tunnel completely, and then that's it. So when they bring it back, they're turning it into a little ball that they can leave for the egg. So when the egg hatches, it has food, and eventually they chew their way out, and then they start their lives.
Very cool. That kind of, I will come back to this other question, but that is really closely related to another question from Grand Woodlands. They're asking, do all bees make honey then?
Yes, that's an interesting question, because I've even tried to find out the exact answer to that, because I think it's a technicality, what you call honey. I think technically honeybees make the honey. Bumblebees make something similar, which some people call honey. Some people say you can't call it honey, but it is a similar substance that they use to, to feed their young and to grow their colony. Because like the honeybees, they do have a long season. For it's not every single year they do die off and whatnot, but it is a very long period of time from spring to fall. So they do. beyond that, I don't think I should say, because it gets very technical and that's beyond me. But that's the basics that I understand it to be.
So most make it a form of honey.
Well, the bumblebees do, because they got a similar structure, but a lot of the solitary bees don't make honey. No, they eat the pollen and they drink the nectar. They turn some of that into some food for their young, and that's as far as they go.
Hey, awesome question. Okay, the next one is from Mrs. DeSoto's class. They're asking, do bees only come out in the summer and spring?
Well, they come out all the growing season long. So early spring, the queen bees, let's say bumblebees, will come out and they'll try to find food and a home to start their colony. Other kinds of bees are spring bees that come out. Summertime, we see different bees, but also in the fall, I see bees feeding from flowers right until it gets extremely cold. And so there's so many species, as you saw, and they've all got slightly different lifestyles. So it's kind of hard to say, but if you can have flowers right from the early spring, and what's native in your area, what naturally flowers, including trees and shrubs, early in the spring, right through to late fall, when you have asters and goldenrods, for instance, you're supporting your bees in all that they need to do. And you're also helping other pollinators, including like the monarch. If you've got monarchs in your area, you're helping them. You're helping other critters with their migration or with getting ready for winter, whatever they need to do. And just a quick note about goldenrods. People often think they cause hay fever. They don't. The pollen is too heavy. It's this ragweed that blooms at a similar time. So goldenrod is safe to have in your garden.
Goldenrod is so beautiful. I that's one of my favorites. That actually kind of is related to another question that we have from Jody, asking, what do bees eat in the winter? Do they eat in the winter? What happens to them when there's not food available?
Well, I think where it's cold enough, Julie, that they go dormant. Some bees will die, and some bees that are overwintering will simply go dormant. So they're not, to my understanding, they're not technically eating during the winter.
Yeah, kind of like we get to do a big long sleep over the winter, wake back up when it's warm out. We have a question coming in from YouTube asking, what are the impacts of climate change on bees and other pollinators? That's a big question, but we could touch on a couple of them.
Well, as the earth is evolving and changing, some plants and animals can thrive more in other areas and not so much in other areas. So things are moving and changing. But I think the bottom line in my eyes is just keep planting plants for the bees. And it was on the screen, but I didn't really highlight it. But if you can plant plants that are native to your region, what is in your area naturally? That's what the animals that are naturally there have co-evolved for centuries to need to feed off of. So if you can have the plants that they need and allow them some space for shelter, for nesting and whatnot, then you're doing a very, very big thing for these wonderful little allies. Because again, native plants, they're so important. Some bees are specialists. They have to have a certain kind of plant or else they can't thrive. Some of them are generalists and they can go to a whole wide variety of flowers, but some of them really need a certain kind of native plant to feed off of. So if you can just keep supporting them throughout these changes, that would be really, really good.
Yeah, we have to think that the environment is changing so quickly to a bee's perspective that any little leg up that we can give them to try to help survive, I think, is helpful, right? We want to give them that little extra nudge so we can keep them alive and around. Okay, we have a few more. I know we're kind of at the end of time, but if we go a couple of minutes over, we do have a couple other great questions. This one is asking, what animals eat bees? So do bees have natural predators that they have to watch out for?
That's a very good question, and I'm not up on all of them. I do know I've actually seen a picture of a hummingbird going for a little bee. I think some birds can eat little bees. I think there's quite a few actually predators out there that can eat bees, but I can't think of them all off the top of my head. But yes, there definitely are some animals that eat bees.
I would think bees are a pretty hefty insect. You got to think some animals must be looking at them as a pretty good snack. Mm-hmm. Okay, two more questions.
Well,
so this one is asking.
There's actually wasps that can eat bees as well. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yes, yeah, wasps and hornets. I see Ryan's telling us that. Yep. This one's asking, can different types of bees live together, or do they have to be separate? So we talked about lots of different species. Do they ever live together?
Well, in terms of living together, I guess it depends how closely you mean, because that person, Heather Holm, I spoke about in one of her pictures in her book, she shows a path. And the path is sort of sandy, earthy. And she shows along that path many, many different nests that she's identified along that path. They're fairly close together, they're several feet within an area that is several feet large, many different kinds of bees nesting there. And so they're kind of close together. They're kind of doing their own thing. They're separate enough from one another, but they are in a similar area. So if you're talking about like an area several feet wide, yes, there can be many species there. There are some species of bees that they're sort of semi-social, semi-solitary, that the bees of the same species might make their own nests but close together and have a sort of a collection of nests there. So there's quite a variety.
Yeah, I think that's the general answer to lots of these questions. There's so much variety. It really depends.
There's also cuckoo bee. I mean, cuckoo bees will actually go into an existing nest of another species, and they won't be bother gathering pollen for their young, because they'll just take over that nest and use the pollen and that nectar from that nest strategy.
Okay, we do just have like a couple more questions, but I did want to give a chance. I see we did kind of have a drop off of a couple of our cameras, but do we have any classes that worked on the activity sheet and wanted to share some of them on camera? Don't see a lot of cameras that are left, but do we have any schools that wanted to? If you would like to, if you have anybody that has any drawings they'd like to share, you're welcome. Just come up to the camera and pop them in front of the camera, and we'll highlight them as we answer our last couple questions. Okay. If not a big deal, but if you do, you are more than welcome to. Okay. The next question is, what do they use to make their nests? And again, I'm sure this really depends, but maybe if you could give us a couple of examples.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so some nests, when they nest in the pithy stems, so let's say you have perennials in your garden and you've snipped them back. If you've left them about, a good 12 or 15 inches, and it's hollow at the top, some bees will actually go in there and nest them. They'll nest in like sumacs, raspberries, I think elderberries, variety of stems like that. So if you can leave some of those, they'll go there. Some of them will go in old tree stumps and logs on the ground. Some of them will go in old rodent burrows, like homes that mice and whatnot have made. Some of them will go in old insect holes that insects might have made, other insects might have burrowed in the wood to make homes. So there's quite a variety of places where they can make their nests. And what they use, some of them will use mud to seal off the different chambers. Some of them will use leaves. They'll use a mixture of things, for sealing and making their nests.
Yeah, I really like the example you talked about with the leaf cutter ones that use those leaves to make it's just so cool what nature is able to do. Okay, yes. I think we have time maybe just for a couple more quick questions. This one is asking, can two different types of bees breed together?
A very good question. I don't know. I'd have to ask a scientist that question if they've ever heard of it. I've never heard of it myself.
Yeah, I have heard examples of other species being forced to live close together and slowly starting to, be able to breed, but I don't know if that.
I've never heard of that. I know sometimes trees will cross, and sometimes there are certain birds where sometimes they can cross over, but I've never heard of that with bees. But
yeah, and this next one is a kind of an interesting one. How big can bees get? Do you know what the largest bee species?
I don't have exact measurements, but I mean some bumblebees can be quite large, and some of the bees can be very, very tiny. So you do have a range, like what you're seeing with my fingers there. I can't even think of what the measurement would be with that. Because large carpenter bees, they can be. I think one of our biggest bees is the large carpenter bee, and they can be quite a size.
Yeah, I've had before, pick them up and they're heavy in your hand. They can get so big. Okay, those are lots of wonderful questions. I have one quick thing I would like to share with everyone. So maybe if we have one more question come in, we might have time to share it, but I did want to make sure I got this out to you all before we lose anyone as we get close to the end of the hour. If you guys enjoyed this presentation, we have an upcoming presentation on oceans. So we've talked a little bit about what's going on land. Let's take a look at Oceans for World Oceans Day. So if you haven't signed up for it already, teachers, I'll go ahead and pop the link in the chat for you as well. Or you can scan that QR code. It should be great. It's with our partners at OceanWise, so they always put on a really great presentation for us as well. And don't forget, if you signed up for this series with the CWF, we do have one more presentation coming up. I believe that one's next week, maybe 2 weeks from now, but it's coming up soon. So we have one more CWF presentation where we can talk about what actions you are all taking in your school. So if you're planting native pollen supporters in your school gardens, that's a great opportunity for you to share that online with everyone. So I have one last question for you, Sarah, before I let you go. And mine is what would be your final takeaway or your last message that you would like to send our children home with today after the event?
Well, it doesn't matter what size we are on this planet, because we all have a role to play, and these bees are so important. They deserve to be here, but also for our well-being. And so if you can just notice them, observe them, and see what they're doing and where they're doing, and maybe you can learn different ways to help them in your own garden or in your own community. And you can plant for them with native plants. And yes, that's wonderful if you can plant for them and give them space in your home and a bit more tolerance. Be careful, but be caring as well.
Yeah, they're still wild animals, so, they don't know better. So thank you very much for such a wonderful presentation. I always look so forward to having you with us for these events. And thank you to all of our schools. Thanks for sticking with us. I know we went a little over time, and thanks to all of our friends who joined us on YouTube. That's it. So everybody have a wonderful afternoon. It was so nice to see everyone. Go save some bees.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.